The Salamanders are one of the most interesting Space Marine chapters and probably the scariest looking. They hail from a planet called Nocturne, which is essentially Mustafar from Star Wars, just nothing but lava lakes and temperatures that routinely get into the multi-hundreds of degrees. And so there's an interesting bit of speculative biology of the Salamanders. What would humans from a planet like this look like? They have charcoal black skin and blood red eyes. They wear green with hot rod flames, and they wear the skins of lava lizards. And what are these incredibly scary looking Space Marines like? They're the nicest guys. Space Marines are the good guys, but usually they're kind of secretive jerks who just show up to steal the glory of victory from the Astra Militarum and Adeptus Sororitas who actually defend mankind. But the Salamanders are very virtuous Space Marines. They fight to defend the innocent at all cost, which is kind of hilarious because they love defending innocents, protecting civilians, and making sure that nobody on their side gets too hurt. But they also love flamethrowers and melt-a-guns. Like, the damage that they dish out is pretty vicious, but they're just absolute sweethearts. Usually, Space Marines, they keep their chapter keep or in their spaceships. They keep away from humanity, and they're pretty much almost like a separate species of creatures. But the Salamanders, they live amongst the people. Like, they report, like, they're just regular workers. You know, when duty calls, they put on their salamander cap and they kiss their wife goodbye and they head out into the trenches. The Salamanders are really, really cool, and I have never painted one up. And that has to change. The modern Primaris Space Marines are, in my opinion, perfect. I love how large and in charge they are, towering over the other factions of 40k. There aren't many options to really spice up a Marine though from the starter box, and I think that's on purpose. This box has to work for every different color of Space Marine. I decided on the Reloading the Bolter Marine. I've never used these arms before, but since this model will be a one-off, I like the storytelling in these arms. I assembled my Marine, and right now, he's looking spicy. Now, there is absolutely nothing special about this intercessor that makes them particularly Salamanders-y, and I don't have a Salamander upgrade frame or any interesting bits, but I do have a weird idea. The Salamanders wear the skin of the dragon-like monsters that live in their homeworld. Typically, this is done through careful sculpting with green stuff, but I don't think my skills are up to the task, and I have an idea I've been dying to try out: Sandpaper. Sandpaper looks a little like scales, and honestly, these are probably in better scale than the Games Workshop ones. I drew out a Speedo shape and I flipped it around so that I was cutting the paper part. I held it up to my Marine and it looks pretty good. I refined my triangles and then carefully bent the pieces into shape. Whatever plastic keeps the sand on the paper likes to crack, but it's not flaking off. I used some super glue to stick it onto his crotch and I think it's looking darn good. I decided to give him a little more on his arm. I can't quite eyeball it. I guess I know crotches better than shoulders, so I took a piece of paper, held it up and traced out the shape. I cut out my sandpaper to match and glued it on. I used 80 grit sandpaper. I like how that looks, but I would be interested in trying out 60 and 30 grit too. The Salamanders do wear purity seals like the other Space Marine chapters, but I feel like those little paper tassels would just burn off under the harsh conditions of Nocturne. So I like the look of the Salamander skins better. Instead of purity seals, I want to make some buttons that are holding on the skins. I took the smallest amount of green stuff and rolled it into 4 small balls. I put a drop of super glue onto the edge of the dragon skin and then took one of my little balls and stuck it into the glue. Then I smushed it flat with a popsicle stick, and then to make my little gemstone in the middle, I took a needle applicator tip and pressed it into the putty, leaving behind a donut shape with a little round ball right in the center. I love how this looks, and I didn't need to fire up the 3D printer to do it. My Salamander's all done, and I think the sandpaper worked like a charm. I'm really excited to see how it paints up. But now it's time to put this guy on a base, and I think there's only one possible choice for a Salamander, and that's gotta be lava. I've made a few different lava bases over the years to varying degrees of success, but I have a new idea I want to try out. I took some cork and tore off 2 large chunks for his feet to stand on, gluing these down to the base using plenty of super glue. I glued on a lot more cork than I planned to be under his feet because I wanted to look like he's standing on a rock that is quickly sinking into the lava. I put him onto his base, making a mark so I could see where his feet would end up, and then I tore off the top layer of cork everywhere else. Now for the lava. One of my new favorite tools in my collection is UV Cure resin. I put a few drops down on the base. This stuff is really thick, like Hershey's chocolate syrup thick, so I don't have to worry too much about it running over the edge of the base. I poked it around until it covered all of the exposed plastic and made it run up the cork just a little. Now for the secret spice, some little balls. These are nail art decorations that come in a few sizes. I carefully dropped these into the resin. They sunk in just the right amount and it'll do a great job of looking like gloopy lava bubbles ready to burst. Once I had everything in place, I locked it down with my UV light, giving it a good 5 minutes, which turned the resin into a hard glass-like surface. Now to get them ready for painting. Because of how unique the base is and how I plan to paint it, I'm going to keep the Marine and base separate for now. Now the Salamanders have a split color scheme. Their shoulders and backpack are black with everything else being green, and I think the easiest way to achieve that is going to be a good old-fashioned Zenny slap. Or Zenny chop. Slap chop with a zenithal. I never really got the hang of slap chop, but I think glazing over a zenithal undercoat really looks sharp. I sprayed down my Marine with black primer and gave him a zenithal highlight, giving him a dusting of the white, not blasting all the way up to pure white. I want him to be a little on the dark side, so the lava on the base can really shine bright. I dusted the base and then sprayed the lava over and over until I had an ultra white base coat. Now to fill in my colors. I don't have a perfect color for Salamander's green, so I mixed Army Painter Speed Paint Cunning Camo and Shamrock Green. I'm just guessing, but 6 drops of one and 3 drops of the other feels about right, with 6 drops of thinner. I glazed this all over his armor, and I might get in trouble for this, but I just don't care about the in-between parts of Space Marines. I think it looks just fine with them being the armor color. I prefer to spend my painting time on other things. On his shoulder and backpack, I used Army Painter Grim Black, which I find a little blacker than Games Workshop's Black Templar. The Games Workshop one has a little too much green in it for my taste. The only thing left is the trim and decorations, which I can't do with glazing. I base coated these parts with a pastel yellow and then layered gold on top. Gold is a tricky color because most gold paints out there are super transparent, so it really matters what color's underneath. But you know what covers a base coat like a dream? That's right, our Patreon. Over there, we have a new set of terrain every month. This month, it's the Ruined Temple. A set of ancient blocks, ruined walls, and chaotic accessories, all perfectly modular, allowing you to build the ancient temple that is right for you. And if you always want to be up to date on what's happening at Eons of Battle and be entered into our monthly giveaways, this month we're picking 1 follower to receive the Age of Sigmar Dominion box, and 3 followers that'll win this month's terrain. Follow the link in the description to sign up to our newsletter. The Salamander's color scheme looks really good on Space Marines. And speaking of Space Marines, to anybody painting Space Marines, I highly recommend Army Painter Speed Paint over Games Workshop Contrast. I kind of like Games Workshop Contrast a little bit better, maybe I just like their colors more, but they dry so fast. It's hard to paint a Space Marine without getting any coffee staining, or if you miss a spot, there is nothing you can do to go back and fix it. With Army Painter Speed Paint, it dries nice and slow, so you can take your time, perfect everything, make sure you've got every nook and cranny, and the finish is awesome on big ol' models like Space Marines. Speaking of colors though, I kind of made a mistake on my dragon skin. I figured to be green because their armor is green, but it's actually kind of like a red. But that's okay, because I have some big plans in store for this Marine. He's really dark right now. It's time to brighten him up a little bit. I took a dark red color and watered it down, glazing it over the dragon skin, letting some of the green show through. Then I added a little bit of white paint into the red and hit it with a dry brush to highlight the individual scales. I did one more round of dry brushing with a little more white paint mixed in and my dragon skin was finished. I used up the last of my red, picking out the gems on his buttons and his eyes. Then I took a little brown contrast paint and shaded the gold, darkening the Aquila and adding shadows to the underside of the shoulder pad trim. To brighten the top of the gold, I mixed in some silver paint and did some small highlights bringing it up. Now for my favorite part of painting Space Marines, highlights. Space Marines have such lovely simple shapes, it's really easy to see where the marks should go. I made up a green a little bit brighter than the speed paint and put this on any surface facing up, the top of his arms, his hands, and his dome and ears. Then I mixed up more neon green and did another round of highlights, leaving behind a lot less paint, almost like an edge highlight, creating something like a reflection. His armor is all done and ready for some decals. I prepped the shoulders with gloss varnish to fill in any surface imperfections and placed my decals onto my wet palette to soak, giving them a drop of micro set each. I find this essential for decals going on round surfaces, as they have to stretch and flex so much. This stuff slightly melts the plastic, letting it lay right. I put micro sole over the shoulder and then slid my decals into position, crushing them flat to the shoulder with a damp paper towel. Once they were dry, I glazed on more gloss paint over top to trap them in place and get rid of the edge of the clear plastic the decal is printed on. Now my Salamander was almost finished, but I feel like his lower half still needs a little something. I broke out my good brush and got to freehanding some flames. It took an upsetting number of coats to get yellow to cover over black, but after a while I had a decent looking ring of fire around his ankle. In another life, it would have been really fun to collect a Salamander's army. These colors are a lot of fun. Although I don't know if I could handle painting that many hot rod flames, and I kind of get enough from my Titan army that I'm still working on. It's just gonna take a while to get to the Warhound. But now I need to paint this lava base, and I am really excited about how it's looking. It looks really juicy. I think this combo would make a great toxic waste base as well as lava. It just comes down to what color you paint it. To start off, I dry brushed my rocks with a gray paint and then dry brushed over that with a black. It really looks like the rocks are sinking. Then I glazed a yellow over everything. I took a little bit of orange and put this over the rocks and then went to red. The red might have been a little much. Lava isn't really red, it's more of an orange, but I used it sparingly. I picked out my bubbles with white paint and it's looking pretty good right now, but it doesn't look like he's really meant to be standing on the base. I sprayed some whiting from underneath to make a little bit of object source lighting and then sprayed on some yellow. Now his butt has a nice subtle glow that sells the lava effect much better. I sealed him up with my favorite varnish, Vallejo Satin Mecha Varnish, and then painted the rim of the base black. Gloss black. The different finishes of black paint change the look dramatically, and I find gloss black base rims look the best. The black will appear different and darker to anything else in the model. The rim of the base isn't really real, it's kind of like a display plinth. I really like the Salamanders. They kind of remind me of the Space Wolves. They're really fun to paint because they have a lot of extra decorations and they have a lot of different colors, so you never really get bored. The Salamanders don't get as much love and attention as some of the other first founding chapters from Games Workshop, or even some of the second chapters. Like the Black Templar, they're not a first founding chapter, they're just an offshoot of the Imperial Fist, but somehow they're like the poster child for Space Marines. And the little old Salamanders, all they have is an upgrade frame. Ooh, they do have two of the coolest Space Marine characters of all time. Vulcan Heaston with his thermal lance is one of the coolest miniatures that is way too small. Like he's like half the height of a Primaris Space Marine. He is absolutely tiny. And Adrax Agatone is a model that I absolutely drool over. I really want one, but the amount of kit bashing and converting I'd have to do to turn in Black Templars would kind of ruin it. Like I'd have to carve off everything on the miniature, but it is really, really cool. It was fun pretending I'm a Salamanders player for one day, but I want to try out some of the other Space Marine chapters. So let me know in the comments below, which one should I try out next? And as always, thanks for watching.